to change the raw water pump on my Yanmar 2GM20. It's leaking. I did a bunch of work to the boat and I thought I was all done, and then realized it was leaking out of the weep hole. And you're probably going to say to yourself, why replace it? Just rebuild it. I think I'm tired. I think that may be why. We're getting ready to go to Catalina, and I've got a lot of things going on and don't have time to rebuild it. I've never rebuilt one before. I know there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. Apparently getting the bearings in can be a little bit of an issue. So I have found a replacement. It's not an OEM Yanmar raw water pump. The OEM is over $600, but apparently this replacement does work, and I'm going to have the old one rebuilt, so I will have a spare, and it should be pretty easy to get it off. You just have to unhook this bracket right here. It's held on by a couple of bolts, and then you've got the belt around the pulley that needs to come off, and then you've got the two hoses that need to come off as well. So you need a 12 millimeter to get these bolts off, and then a flathead screwdriver to get the clamps off the hoses. But before you get started, you have to make sure that you've got the raw water intake closed. So that seacock needs to be closed, because as soon as you take this hose off, that leads to the strainer and then to your raw water intake. You're going to have water in the boat. So make sure that you've got that valve closed, that seacock closed, before you start doing your work. And mine is always closed unless I'm running the engine. So first things first, we'll take these bolts off. The new water pump I'm getting comes with the bracket. I don't know if it's going to be painted or not, but it definitely comes with the bracket. And after I get it off, I'm going to take it over to the shop, pick up my new one, and leave this one for it to be rebuilt as a spare. The same thing you do when you change the impeller. You're going to take this bracket off to get access to the back of the water pump, to take that plate off when you're going to replace the impeller. And I do have a video posted where I show you how to change the impeller on this 2GM20. And as with all things involving something that's as old as this engine is, this is a 1991 Hunter. And as I said before, the OEM water pump is over $600. And they made a couple of different water pumps for this 2GM20. And one is a 2GM20YEU. I think that might stand for Yanmar Europe, because supposedly some of the water pumps were made in Europe. Let me interrupt myself here. I don't want to make this any more confusing than it already is. Bottom line, know your serial number, and that there are different raw water pumps for the 2GM20 when you're ordering a replacement or just parts. Now let's get back to my discussion of the differences with the 2GM20YEU. And they don't have a key to them. This one has a key for the water pump. Instead, I don't know what it's called, but it has a bar that goes across that the impeller fits in, the 2GM20YEU. And the way you're supposed to know the difference in terms of what engine you have is looking at your serial number. And if it starts with an E before the number, then that means that you have a Yanmar 220YEU, and that impeller is not going to have a key. Some of these pumps, the tail where the hoses fit on each side, instead of parallel to one another, they're cocked at an angle. These are just parallel to each other. So there's a couple of different water pumps out there, and you have to make sure that you get the right one. And supposedly the place that I'm buying this from has spent some time talking to the Yanmar dealer, and they're a certified, or they're a authorized Yanmar dealer, and he hooked them up with the right one. And it still comes in a Yanmar box, but it's not the $600 pump. So I don't know what that's all about. Maybe I'll find out today. I'm going to take the hoses off after I get this loose, because it's just a little easier to get to the hoses with the bracket off. and you need to have something to catch the water, because that's the hose that leads to your raw water intake. It also leads to your strainer first, but so that's it. It's loose, and now we can get the belt off too. And then after that, we're just going to take the clamps off the hoses, and it is that easy. You're not going to be able to avoid spilling water, I don't think, but you can try to minimize it. Interestingly, there's only one clamp on the hose on each side instead of the customary two, so I'm not sure about that. Okay, we've got one clamp loose. Might see about replacing this hose right here. So I'll measure it and see when I pick up the new pump if they have a replacement hose. All right, we've got the hoses loose. I'll stick that up here so it won't be dripping. The other difference that you'll see in the different parts that are out there for a 2GM20 is some of the tails that the hoses go on are formed as part of the body of the water pump, and some of them are screw-in fittings. These are screw-in fittings, but apparently the one I'm getting is a formed part of the water pump. If we were changing the impeller, we would take these bolts off to get this plate off to get to the impeller. As I mentioned, I do have a video posted where it shows me changing the impeller on this engine. So now that we've got it off, I'm going to take it to the diesel shop and get the new part, make sure it's the right part, and then leave this one to be rebuilt. I've decided to go ahead and see if I can replace this hose. I'm going to take it off and then take it with me when I go get the water pump. I know that it's one of the original hoses that was on the boat when I bought it over 20 years ago because it's painted. And these other ones that are not painted are ones that I've replaced. So this just has a clamp over the hose right here that's going to have to come off. Leave that right where it is. Clean this up before I take it over there. All right, I'm back from Advanced Power Marine and I got my new water pump. And I left my old water pump with them and they're going to rebuild it. And really the difference that I see in this water pump, the bracket, I put my old water pump right next to this one, the bracket is exactly the same. And the pulley's the same, and the difference here is where the hoses hook up to the tails on each side. Instead of it being a fitting that's screwed into the body of the water pump, these are part of the water pump. So that's one difference. The plate is the same diameter, but it has slots on it for a flathead screwdriver, and the impeller is different. So the impeller on the original OEM water pump on my 2GM20F has this keyhole in it, and this one does not. It has a pin on it instead, so that's the difference. So looking for an OEM water pump that's exactly like the one that I've got on the boat now with the impeller that has a key, that one was over $600, but it's made by Johnson, and they're the ones that made the water pump originally, the raw water pump for my boat originally. And this one apparently is a Johnson pump as well. So how it's been explained to me is that the original pump made by Johnson for Yanmar was to Yanmar specs, and that pump is still sold today, but it's very expensive. You can still get another pump from Johnson through Yanmar, which is not exactly like your original with the differences that I described, but I paid $256 instead of over $600 for it. I went ahead and bought a new hose, and the hose is a Yanmar hose, and it's exactly like the one that I had on there originally, kind of a question mark on one end and a curve on the other, and this hose was $31. So I'm going to go ahead and install the new water pump and the hose. So here we are. I've got a new pump, and I'm going to have the other one rebuilt, so I'll have a spare on the boat. So now we'll just put it all back together. It'll be really simple. Famous last words, but it should be really easy. This is probably the easiest project that I've done in a while. Okay, before I tighten the bracket, I'm going to go ahead and tighten the clamps on the two hoses, and then use a screwdriver to get some leverage to pull back the bracket to try to get the belt tight. I'm going to tighten the bracket back up that goes around the hose. Okay, it's good and snug. Don't. Hopefully I didn't get that too tight. I don't think I did. I think it's okay. All right, I think I've gotten everything tightened down well. Just going to check everything. So we'll fire it up, see if we have any leaks. I think I got it all back together. I'll open the seacock for the raw water before I start the engine. Wow. The pulley was definitely not spinning true. I checked to make sure that the pulley was seated on the shaft correctly, and it was. That wasn't the problem, so yikes. Well, we're back at it. So I was able to pick up another pump. I swapped out the one that was wobbling, and when I was there, the fact that I had taken a video of it wobbling was pretty good, because they could actually see the wobble rather than have me describe it. And then they did something I didn't think of doing, is he just took and turned this, and he noticed that as he turned it, the distance between the pulley and the head of this bolt right here changed. so the shaft was definitely bent. In my defense, I don't think I bent it because I didn't brace when I was adjusting the bracket for the tension on the belt. I did not put the screwdriver on the bracket, so I don't think I bent it. So anyway, they swapped it out, no problem. They didn't give me a hard time about it. And then I picked up my rebuilt pump. But I think I'm going to put this one on and see how it does, and keep my other one as a spare. So have to do it all over again. Luckily it's not that difficult, just the 2 bolts and then putting the hoses on. While I was there, I decided I would go ahead and get new hose clamps. So I'll be putting the new clamps on, and hopefully that will be it. Then later I need to adjust the tension on this alternator belt. It is definitely too loose. So let's get started. I'm just going to pull it back and get some tension on it. That's what they're recommending. On these 2 bolts that you use to put the bracket on for the water pump, there is a washer, so you want to make sure you don't lose that washer. Got some new clamps for the hoses. All right, the moment of truth. So I have the 2 bolts in. I have the belt tensioned. I have the new clamps on both ends of the hose. And we're ready to fire it up and see if we have a true spinning, no wobble pulley. Let's hope for the best. Huge difference, so we don't have the wobble anymore. You definitely see how loose the alternator belt is. I'm going to tighten that up. Well, it's all done, and like all boat projects, it didn't turn out to be as easy as I thought it would be. So I thought I'd just replace it, put it on, and that particular one had a bent shaft on it, and I don't think I did it, but and I hope that it's not a omen of things to come, that I'm going to have more problems with this pump. Hopefully it's just a one-off problem and that's it. So I have that pump on, and then I have the other one as a spare. And like I said before, obviously you can just rebuild it yourself. We finished a big project where we put a sea strainer in, a new fuel pump, and changed the fuel filters, oil change, all that stuff. I just got done with all that, so I did not feel like messing with rebuilding it. So hopefully we'll be all good for our trip over to Catalina. It's about 26 miles off the coast here. It's a beautiful trip over, and I think we're ready. So thank you for watching. I hope that you got something out of the video, and we'll see you next time.